Everyone thought he was digging his own grave. They were wrong. The ground was the only place left that hadn't tried to kill him yet. By the third day, Elias Crowe had stopped looking at the horizon. There was nothing out there anymore. No road, no tracks, no dust from passing wagons. Just heat. The kind that didn't sit on your skin. It pressed through it. He had made the mistake on the second morning. A small one. That's how it always starts. The group had split at a dry riverbed, 3 men heading north, following what they believed was an old freight path. Elias had gone west instead. Shorter route, less distance. He had said it out loud. Cut across. We'll hit the ridge faster. No one followed him. And by noon, he realized why. The land out here didn't forgive shortcuts. It erased them. The ground flattened into something endless. Cracked earth and pale dust stretching in every direction. Broken only by low ridges that shimmered in the heat like something unreal. There was no shade. Not real shade. Only thin shadows cast by rocks that burned your hands if you touched them. By the time the sun reached its highest point, his first canteen was already empty. He didn't panic then. Not yet. He rationed the second one. Small sips. Every hour. He told himself he just needed to reach elevation. Find wind. Find anything. But the air didn't move. Not even a little. It just hung there. Heavy. Unmoving. Like it had been left behind by something that no longer cared. By the afternoon of the second day, his tongue had started to swell. Talking to himself became harder. Not that there was much to say. The sun rose. The sun burned. The sun fell. And in between, he walked. That night, he tried to sleep. He found a shallow dip in the land, pressed himself against the earth, hoping the heat would bleed out of him. It didn't. The ground held it, stored it, gave it back, like it didn't want to let go. He woke before sunrise, already sweating. That was when the thought first came to him. Not fully, not clearly, just a feeling that the surface was wrong. By midday, it became undeniable. The air was hotter than the day before. His shadow shrank beneath him until it was nothing. And when he crouched beside a rock to rest, he noticed something strange. The dirt beneath it was cooler. Not by much, but enough. Enough that his fingers stayed there longer than they should have. Enough that he pressed his palm flat against it, and didn't pull away. That was when he stopped looking for shade, and started thinking about the ground. He didn't decide right away. It took another hour. Another stretch of walking in circles he didn't realize were circles. Another moment of standing still, trying to remember which direction he had come from, and failing. That was the worst part. Not the heat, not the thirst. The moment he understood. He wasn't getting out by walking. Elias looked down at the earth beneath his boots. Dry, cracked, hard enough to break skin. It didn't look like anything that could help him. It looked like something that had already won. But he had nothing else left. No water to waste. No strength to gamble. Only time. And even that was running out. He dropped to his knees. At first, he just pushed at the dirt with his hands. It resisted. Of course it did. Everything out here resisted. He kept going anyway. Scraping, pulling, breaking through the top layer inch by inch. The sun burned the back of his neck while he worked. His hands split open. Dust filled his mouth every time he exhaled. But a few inches down, the soil changed. Darker, denser, cooler. Elias stopped. Just for a second. Just long enough to press his face close to the opening he had made. And breathe. The air coming out of that shallow hole was cooler than anything he had felt in 3 days. Not by much, but enough. He didn't smile. Didn't say anything. He just kept digging. Because for the first time since he made the wrong turn, the ground wasn't fighting him. It was giving something back. And that was enough to keep him alive. For now. By the time the sun climbed again, Elias was already awake. Not because he had rested, but because the ground had cooled just enough for him to notice the difference. He stayed low. That was new. The first 2 days he had kept moving, always moving, like distance itself might save him. Now he understood. Movement was costing him more than it gave back. The hole he had dug the day before wasn't much. Maybe a foot deep. Wide enough for his shoulders. But when he lowered himself into it, the air shifted. Subtle. Barely there. Still. Cooler. And that was enough. He sat there for a long time. Listening. Not for sound. There was none. But for his own body. The way his breathing slowed. The way the pounding in his head eased. Just slightly. Then he looked at his hands. Split open across the knuckles. Packed with dry dirt. He flexed them once. Pain shot up his arms. He flexed them again anyway. Not deep enough. It came out as a whisper. Dry. Cracked. Almost soundless. But it was the first thing he had said in hours. He started digging again. Slower this time. More deliberate. Instead of tearing at the surface, he worked around the edges, widening the hole first. Making space. Making it usable. Every movement cost him. Every push of dirt pulled moisture out of him he didn't have. But every inch down, the ground gave something back. The soil grew heavier. Less dust. More clay. It held shape when he cut into it. Didn't collapse as easily. That mattered. Even if he didn't fully understand why yet. By mid-morning, the hole reached his waist. He climbed in. Turned. Sat with his back against one side, knees pulled in. The sun still hit his shoulders. But his legs were in shadow. Real shadow. For the first time since he left the riverbed. He wasn't burning everywhere. That was when he noticed the second change. The smell. Faint. Damp. Almost like rain that hadn't happened yet. The deeper earth. Elias closed his eyes. Just for a second. And when he did, the world stopped spinning. It didn't last. Nothing out here lasted. But it was enough to show him something important. The ground wasn't just cooler. It was stable. Around noon, he heard something. At first, he thought it was the wind. But the air hadn't moved in days. Then he realized. Footsteps. Distant. Crunching across dry earth. Elias froze. He pushed himself higher, just enough to look over the edge of the hole. 2 figures. Moving slowly across the ridge. One of them stumbled. The other kept walking. They saw him. Or rather, they saw the hole. Because that's what they walked toward. By the time they reached him, Elias was standing beside it. Breathing shallow. Barely steady. The taller man squinted down into the pit. Then back at Elias. What the hell are you doing? Elias didn't answer right away. Didn't have the strength. And, older, slower, looked past him, scanning the horizon. There's nothing out here, he muttered. We're not gonna make it walking. Elias swallowed. It hurt. Everything hurt. But he forced the words out. Don't walk. They both looked at him. Then at the hole. Then back at him again. The taller one let out a dry laugh. You digging for water? Elias shook his head. Cool. The words sounded strange out here. Out of place. Like something from another world. The men didn't understand. Not yet. The taller one crouched, reached down, pressed his hand into the dirt inside the hole. He hesitated. Just for a second. Then pulled his hand back. Frowning. It's different. Elias nodded once. That was all he had. They stayed for a few minutes. Not long. Long enough to feel it. Not long enough to trust it. We keep moving, the taller one said finally. We'll hit something. The older man didn't argue. He just looked at Elias again. Then at the hole. Then back at the horizon. And they left. Elias watched them go until they disappeared into the shimmer. He didn't call after them. Didn't try to stop them. Because he understood something now. Something simple. Something final. Out here, you don't survive by doing what makes sense. You survive by doing what works. He climbed back into the hole. Lowered himself deeper this time. Pulled loose dirt around the edges. Shaping it. Making it hold. The sun moved. Hours passed. The heat pressed down harder than the day before. But inside the hole, it stayed the same. Not cool enough to be comfortable. But not hot enough to kill him. And out here, that difference meant everything. Elias leaned his head back against the dirt wall. Closed his eyes. And for the first time since the second morning, he wasn't losing ground. He was holding it. And that changed everything. The third day didn't begin. It bled into itself. Elias wasn't sure when he slept, or if he had at all. Time had stopped behaving the way it used to. There was only light, and more light, and the slow, grinding awareness that his body was running out of something it couldn't replace. Water was almost gone. He tilted the canteen. One swallow left. Maybe two, if he lied to himself. He didn't drink it, not yet. Instead, he stayed in the hole. Deeper now, chest level when he stood. Cooler. Noticeably. Not by comfort, but by survival. The air down there didn't burn his lungs. Didn't scrape his throat raw with every breath. It moved, just enough. A faint shift. Like the earth itself was breathing slower than the sky. And taking him with it. He had started shaping it. Not digging blindly anymore. Thinking. Cutting one side steeper, the other sloped. So he could lower himself in without collapsing the edges. So the walls would hold. It wasn't much. But it was no longer just a hole. It was something else. Something intentional. By midday, the heat reached its peak. He could feel it even from below. The way the surface baked. The way the light changed. Harsh. White. Unforgiving. And that's when the dizziness came back. Stronger this time. The kind that doesn't spin the world. It pulls it. Tilts it sideways until nothing lines up anymore. He climbed out. He shouldn't have. But something in him still believed movement meant survival. Old instinct. Hard to kill. He took 10 steps, maybe 12. The horizon bent, shifted, moved where it shouldn't. He stopped, blinking, trying to focus. But the land wasn't steady anymore. The ridges moved. The ground rippled. Water. He saw it. Clear, shimmering, just ahead. Elias staggered forward. Faster now. Heart racing. Hands shaking. It had to be real. It had to be. His foot caught on nothing. And everything collapsed. He hit the ground hard. Dust filling his mouth, his nose, his lungs. The water vanished. The horizon snapped back. Flat. Empty. Silent. Elias didn't move. Not for a long time. Then slowly, he turned his head. Looked back. The hole. Still there. A dark cut in the earth. Real. Unmoving. That's when he understood. Not just with his mind, but with what little strength he had left. The ground wasn't just helping him. It was the only thing telling the truth. He crawled back. Didn't stand. Didn't waste the effort. Just dragged himself across the dirt until his hands found the edge. And dropped inside. The temperature shift hit him immediately. Not relief, but difference. Enough to slow his heart. Enough to stop the shaking. He lay there on his side. Chest rising shallow. Eyes half open. The last of his water pressed against his ribs. Still there. Still waiting. He reached for it. Stopped. No, not yet. Instead, he dug. Fast, not strong, just steady. He pushed the walls back, deepened the center, carved out a space where he could sit without his shoulders touching the surface heat. Inch by inch, the soil grew heavier, cooler, almost damp, and then, something changed. Not the temperature, not the light, the air. It moved, slightly, a faint pull from one side of the hole. So small he almost missed it. Elias froze, listening, feeling. There it was again, a whisper of movement, cooler than the rest. He shifted, pressed his face toward it. It wasn't imagination. There was airflow, somewhere in the earth. There was a pocket, a path, something beneath the surface that held cooler air, and let it move. Elias swallowed, painfully, slow. Then he started digging toward it. Careful now, precise. Not just to go deeper, but to find it. Because if he could reach that pocket, if he could open it, he wouldn't just survive the heat. He might outlast it. Above him, the sun burned hotter than the day before. The surface baked, cracked, shifted. But below, inside the earth, Elias Crowe kept digging toward something the sky could not touch. And for the first time since the third day began, he wasn't reacting anymore. He was adapting. And that was the difference between dying out there and living through it. By the fourth day, Elias stopped thinking in hours. There was only effort, and the cost of it. His body had begun to fail in quieter ways. No more sharp pain, no more panic, just a slow, heavy weakness. The kind that makes lifting your arm feel like a decision. He stayed in the ground now, almost entirely. Only climbing up when he had to clear loose dirt, and even that was becoming harder. The sun above had turned brutal. Not just heat, pressure. Like something pushing down on the land, flattening it. Inside the pit, the air held, barely moving, but cooler, always cooler. Elias kept working toward that faint current. That whisper of air he had felt the day before. He dug sideways now. Not down, not blindly. Carefully cutting into the wall where the temperature shifted, just slightly. Each movement was slower, measured, deliberate. He couldn't afford collapse. Not now, not here. The soil changed again. Thicker, darker, more compact. It resisted differently, less brittle. More solid. Good for structure, bad for speed. Elias leaned his head against the wall, closed his eyes. Just for a moment. When he opened them, the world didn't come back right away. The edges stayed dark, the center blurred. He blinked hard, tried to focus. Nothing sharpened. That scared him more than the heat ever had. Because it meant something was running out. Inside him. He reached for the canteen, hands trembling. Opened it, tilted it. The last swallow hit his tongue like fire. Not relief. Not comfort. Just something his body took, without asking. It was gone. No more chances. Elias lowered the canteen slowly. Set it beside him. Didn't throw it, didn't curse. There was no energy left for anger. Only one thing left to do. He turned back to the wall. To that faint current. That almost imaginary breath of cooler air. And he dug. Minutes passed. Or hours. He couldn't tell anymore. The wall gave way in fragments, chunks of clay falling inward. Then, a shift, the air changed. Suddenly. Noticeably. Cooler. Damp. Elias froze. Every muscle locked. Then slowly. He reached forward, pushed into the loosened section. The wall collapsed. Not fully. Just enough. Revealing a narrow cavity. Dark, still, and breathing. Cool air poured through the opening. Not strong, not rushing, but constant. Different from before. This wasn't surface air. This was deeper, held, protected. Elias pulled himself closer. Half inside now.
The temperature dropped again. For the first time, it felt like shade that worked. He pressed his back against the earth, closed his eyes, and his body finally let go. Not sleep, not fully, but something close. Something his body had been denying for days. Time passed. He didn't measure it, didn't need to.
His eyes again. The light above had shifted, lower, softer. Evening. He had made it through the worst of the day, without water. Inside the earth. Elias turned his head, looked at the narrow chamber he had opened. It wasn't large, barely enough to fit his shoulders, but it held something the surface never could. Stability. The heat above could rise, fall, shift. But down here, it stayed. Consistent, predictable, safe. He understood it now, fully. The ground didn't just protect you. It ignored everything that tried to kill you. The sun couldn't reach here. The air couldn't burn here. The heat couldn't build here. And that meant, this was where you lived. Not above. Below. Elias adjusted the space. Slowly, carefully. Widened the entrance just enough. Reinforced the edges with packed clay. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was building something. Something that could hold. Because out there, on the surface, the heat still ruled. But down here, inside the earth, Elias Crowe had found the one place where it didn't. And that was enough to keep him alive through one more night. By the 5th day, the heat didn't matter anymore. Not the way it had before. It was still there. Still pressing down on the land. Still turning the surface into something unlivable. But Elias wasn't part of that anymore. He stayed below, inside the chamber he had opened, curled slightly to fit. Breathing slower now. Measured. Controlled. The air was still thin. Still dry. But it no longer burned. And that difference was everything. His strength hadn't come back. Not really. His hands were torn, his lips split. His body hollowed out by thirst. But he wasn't slipping anymore. He was holding. The night passed quietly. No wind. No sound. Just the slow rhythm of his breathing. And the steady cool of the earth around him. At some point before sunrise, he slept. Not the broken drifting he had before. Not the half-conscious collapse. Real sleep. Deep enough that time moved without him noticing. When he woke, the light above had softened. Morning. Elias didn't move right away. He listened first. Then slowly, he pushed himself up, crawled toward the opening. The surface greeted him the same way it always had. Bright. Empty. Endless. But something was different. A sound. Faint. Far. Metal. Wood. Movement. Wheels. Elias froze. Heart tightening. Then, voices. Distant. Carried thin across the heat. He pulled himself higher. Barely enough to see past the edge of the pit. There. Along the ridge. A wagon. 2 figures beside it. Moving slow. Searching. Elias tried to stand. Failed. Tried again. Managed halfway. His voice didn't come at first. Just air. Dry. Broken. Thin. Here. It barely carried. Barely anything at all. But one of the figures stopped. Turned. Silence stretched. Then, they started moving toward him. Elias didn't wave. Didn't shout again. He just stayed where he was. One hand resting on the edge of the earth that had kept him alive. By the time they reached him, he was sitting, half in the pit, half out. The taller one looked down. Then, at the hole. Then back at him. You dig this? Elias nodded, slow. The man stepped closer, lowered himself slightly, reached into the pit, paused. His expression shifted. It's cooler. The second man circled the edge, looking down, studying it. How deep? Elias swallowed, painfully. Deep enough. They didn't laugh. Not this time. One of them handed him water. Carefully. Measured. Elias drank. Slow. Controlled. Not because he wanted to, but because now. He understood what rushing cost. They helped him out, lifted him gently. But before they pulled him fully away, Elias looked back, down into the chamber. Dark. Still. Holding. That's where you stay. The men followed his gaze. And for a moment, none of them spoke. Because they understood. Without explanation. Without argument. Out here, the ground was the only place the sky couldn't reach. Days later, when Elias could stand again, when his voice returned, when the shaking stopped, he went back, not to leave, but to finish what he started. He deepened the chamber, widened it, stabilized the walls, then built another, and another. Word spread, slow at first, then faster. Men who had walked past him before came back. This time, they didn't laugh. They dug. By the end of that summer, there were shelters beneath the earth where before there had been none. Not homes. Not yet. But places to survive. Places where the heat couldn't take everything. Elias never called it anything. Never named it. He didn't need to. Because the people who used them understood. The ground had always been there. They had just been standing in the wrong place. And sometimes, survival isn't about finding a way out. It's about knowing when to go down.